Let me ask you a question regarding the interviews that you took of various witnesses. You were present during interviews taken at the state attorney's office, correct?
That's correct.
But you also interviewed some of the witnesses, I don't know, some or all, you'll let me know. You interviewed some witnesses prior to their appearance at the state attorney's office, correct?
Yes, I did.
Did you interview all the witnesses that were later taken to the state attorney's office first? Do you know about how many?
Maybe 5.
Those interviews that you took of the witnesses by yourself,
Okay.
were those interviews recorded in any way?
No.
Transcribed in any way?
No.
Were they written down in terms of questions and answers?
I took notes, yes.
Did the witnesses write out statements?
No, they did not write statements.
So for every one of the witnesses you just listed, there should be a handwritten or a typed report from you.
Report of interview, yes.
And did you provide those reports of interview to the state attorney's office?
Probably did. I don't know if I gave all of them to him. But I did some initial interviews to try to validate whether there was an issue or not that I was looking at.
Now, there came a time when witnesses were subpoenaed to appear at the state attorney's office, correct?
That's correct.
And last time we were here, you will recall that there were several discussions regarding going off the record or staying on the record. You will recall that?
Yes.
Do you know why somebody would want the record to be continuous as opposed to going off the record for some discussion, if you know?
Objection to form, do not answer, privilege.
Would you like to state what privilege it is I'm asking him?
Attorney-client privilege. You're asking him to reveal things that he may have discussed with me and others.
Without revealing any conversation that you have ever had with any attorney representing you or the entity that you work for, do you have an opinion or an understanding of why you keep the record going?
Not related to this.
Not related to this case, right?
Not related to this case. There's been various reasons.
What would they be?
They want to take a break?
No, why would you want to keep it on?
Oh, keep it on.
Yes.
For that, I don't have any information on about that.
Okay. Would you agree that when you have a continuous record, you have evidence of everything that transpired during that period of time?
Objective form.
I'd say that'd be correct.
Now I'm going to ask you questions relevant to this case. When the witnesses were brought to the state attorney's office by subpoena and their statements were taken, isn't it a fact that prior to their statements being taken on the record, there was a private session where questions and answers were interchanged with the witnesses?
That's correct.
Off the record?
That's correct.
And did you take notes during that time?
I did on some, others I didn't. Going there, not knowing how it was going to unfold, I had some questions of certain people that I had questions of. But once we got into the interview, the state attorney was asking those questions, or I got to ask some, but it got to where I couldn't keep up writing and the questions, and I knew that it was being taken down and recorded, so I just quit doing that.
Well, actually, sir, my question related to the questions and answers prior to them being taken down.
Well, same applies.
Okay. So for some of the interviews that were done off the record, you have notes? I'm only asking about what was off the record.
I couldn't tell you. My notes are in there. Some of that could have been when we had the discussions prior, advising the people why they were there, what was going to be asked. those kinds of things. There could be some notes reflecting that.
Once the interviews began on the record, there were times when there were discussions off the record, correct?
That's correct.
Do you know why the record was stopped and there were discussions off the record?
Well, it was reminding it wasn't everyone, but it was reminding certain witnesses that they were under oath, and the only way that they could get in trouble was not to, or they would not have immunity under giving their statement to the state attorney's office, was if they committed perjury.
So there's an interview taking place on the record, and something happens that the witnesses needed reminding of that element that you just described?
That's my recollection, yes.
So then the record would stop, and who would advise the witnesses of that fact?
State attorney.
So the state attorney would then, off the record, tell the witnesses that they were under oath and they would lose any immunity that they were getting if they committed perjury.
That's correct. That's the only way they would lose immunity.
Were there witnesses where that took place several times, if you recall?
I recall at least one, maybe two.
Do you recall who they were?
Lisa Parker and Elisa Rubinowitz.
How would you describe the demeanor of Lisa Parker during her interview?
Nothing that I would say unusual for the circumstances.
She wasn't agitated?
Not overly, no. I think
She wasn't upset?
There were a couple of times that when she was pushed on a question, whether or not it was true or not, she might have gotten upset.
Were you present when Ms. Parker was advised that the state attorney's office was going to seek to revoke her license?
No, I think that it might be her. He just reminded them that if she was perjured herself, that could be a possibility, not that they were going to revoke her license.
But you were present when the discussion was had regarding her license,
I was present.
and that was not on the record.
That I don't recall.
Were you present when discussions were had with Ms. Parker regarding her termination from employment with Miami-Dade County Public Schools?
I don't recall specifically that encounter there.
Were you present when Ms. Rubinowitz was told that the state attorney's office was going to seek to revoke her license?
I don't recall that with her.
What about the fact that she was going to lose her employment?
I don't recall the specific conversation. I know we went off the record with Rubinowitz in regards to her testimony, but I don't really recall specifically the nature of those questions.
Mm-hmm. When you went off the record, is it because her testimony led you to believe that it was being untruthful?
Well, this was the state attorney that went off the record, not me. I can't comment on what he was thinking.
Mm-hmm. Well, when the state attorney went off the record, did you believe that Ms. Parker's testimony was being untruthful at that moment?
Did I personally believe?
Yes, sir.
I believe that.
That she was being untruthful?
Yes.
And so conversation of the record was had to remind her of consequences that she would receive if the state attorney's office believed her testimony to be untruthful.
That was my recollection, yes.
And the same thing happened with Ms. Rubinowitz.
I thought we were talking about Ms. Rubinowitz, but...
No, we're talking about Ms. Parker.
Oh, Ms.
first.
Parker first. I think, trying to recall when they went off the record, but I believe that was mentioned, yes.
Now I'm going to ask about Ms. Rubinowitz.
Okay.
Was there ever a point when she was screaming?
No, not screaming.
Was her voice loud enough to be heard down the hallway?
Now that, because of the nature of their interview rooms, it probably, you could be hearing.
So it's your position that she wasn't distraught enough to be screaming?
That is not my determination. She was emphasized, and she raised her voice, but she wasn't screaming.
Did there come a point in time when Miss Parker indicated that she had to leave?
There may have been, yes.
And was she told that she could not leave?
I don't recall her not being able to leave, no.
Was she excused?
What I recall is Lisa Parker and Lisa Rabinowitz came in. They were scheduled apart, and it went longer. I forget with which one. And I believe it was Lisa Parker and Rabinowitz rode together. So Rabinowitz went longer than anticipated. So Ms. Parker was asked to come back in, or vice versa. It could have been Lisa Rabinowitz. There was that situation. One of them had to come back.
Isn't it a fact that one of them had to leave to pick up her children at school, and she stated that vehemently?
I believe there was an issue with child pickup.
And she was not allowed to leave to go pick up her child, right?
I don't recall that happening.
In fact, when Ms. Rabinowitz returned for her statement, there were discussions with her about whether she had had a good night's sleep, correct?
I don't recall that.
What about Ms. Parker? Was there any discussions about whether she was less stressed out when she arrived for her second day of statement?
I didn't have a conversation with her about that.
But you don't dispute if it's on the record that that's what happened, that is what happened?
I don't know if it's on the record. I won't dispute it, but I don't know that it's on the record.
You don't recall it?
I don't recall.
Who was present during Ms. Parker's statement?
Prosecutor Rosen, myself, Prosecutor Marie Pericles, and my partner Tanya Jackson.
What about for Ms. Rabinowitz?
What about
People there.
same?
When you interviewed Dr. Sklar initially,
Okay.
did you advise her of her right to remain silent?
I believe I did. If I did, there's a form in there I had her sign.
Okay. When you interviewed Lisa Parker,
Mm-hmm.
did you advise her of her rights?
The state attorney did.
And did that include her right to have an attorney present?
I don't recall everything that was stated there, but the state attorney had her rights and swore her in.
Did she sign a rights waiver form?
Not to my knowledge.
What about Alyssa Rabinowitz? Did she sign a rights waiver form?
It would be the same as Lisa Parker and all of the respondents.
It's your recollection specifically with Dr. Sklar that you read her rights and that there's a form?
That was my report of interview between Yolanda Sklar and myself, not with the state attorney's office.
Okay. And did you advise her she had a right to have an attorney present during your interview of her?
She was a witness and not a subject, for one thing. Secondly, she had the right to talk to me, have a union rep, whatever. The form outlines it.
Well, at some point, Dr. Sklar became a subject, correct?
Well, she ended up have violated state statute, was not charged.
Okay, my question was whether at some point in your investigation, she became a subject in your investigation.
I wouldn't say a subject in my investigation, no.
Well, you were seeking to have her arrested.
No.
You presented the case to the state attorney's office, you testified.
I didn't present the case to have her arrested. I just said there was a violation.
What was the purpose of telling the state attorney's office that there was a violation if you were not seeking to have her arrested?
Because I wanted to reveal everything to the state attorney that I knew.
But you told me last time that the only reason she wasn't arrested was because the state attorney's office declined to prosecute.
The reason I said the state attorney's office would not prosecute that crime. I told them about it and they said, no, we're not going.
But you would have.
If they'd have said yes.